Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, doctor, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Okay, guys, let's start. Can you remind me about what we talked about last lecture? Anyone to recap? Yeah? This is not a rhetorical question. I'm waiting for your replies. We talked about new institutionalism. So what we said last lecture about new institutionalism. Okay, how we distinguish between old institutionalism and new institutionalism. And how did we define new institutions, generally speaking? Sorry? So instead of like picking names, so I need volunteers. As I mentioned before, participation counts towards your final grades.
Institutions are set of rules or norms
Yeah.
that shapes people's behaviors and actions.
Okay, so we study this as independent variable, and we need to understand how rules, norms, meaning, symbols affect people's expectations and people's behavior. Okay, and how we speak of like neo-institutionalism, meaning there existed some sort of old institutions or old institutionalism as school of thought. So how can we define old institutionalism, and to what extent it differed from neo-institutionalism?
Old institutionalism was concerned with formal institutions,
Yeah.
and especially that of Western countries and democratic countries.
Yeah.
أو يعني democratic countries.
Developed, yeah, democratically and capitalist countries that, by definition, during that period, the focus was on Western democracies, yeah, and formal institutions. Okay, so what branches or different like theoretical strands we talked about? Because it doesn't represent any kind of coherent theoretical thread. So we talked about different theoretical schools or different theoretical formulations of new institutionalism. So can you hint at what kind of different kinds of new institutionalism we explained in some detail last lecture?
About rational choice institutionalism and sociological institutionalism.
Yeah.
And we talked about how the rational choice institutionalism is like the theory, and it's concerned with the self-interest and utility maximization.
Yeah.
And sociological is similar to a bit like the cultural theory. It's concerned with how like how
Just take your time. Yeah.
How they like in rational choice they think about how the institutions change based on the will and the utility, but in cultural it's a bit different. Sorry, in sociological it's a bit different. I can't really explain it. I'm sorry.
How norms and meanings and beliefs would shape. Yeah, let me get you the table to refresh your mind up. Here we go. Go ahead, Salma.
So it's not really based on calculations like in the rational choice.
Yeah.
It's more like culture. It's based on the values and norms and the beliefs. So
Yeah.
it's the meanings that we assign to the institutions. Sorry, it's through the values يعني.
Yeah. This would like demarcate the boundaries about what's appropriate and what's inappropriate, and then would shape your behavior in that sense. Yeah. Okay. So today we will continue on. I leave like 15 to 20 minutes toward the end of this session to you guys in order to present your reaction papers, the way actually you wrote your reaction papers. Okay, so just like give me a heads up toward the end of the session. So like the final strand or branch of new institutionalism we are going to talk about, or we are going to explain in some detail, is basically, so let me admit these people. Historical institutionalism, and it's again eclectic tradition, so it draws together different logics, like the calculations, the calculus logic, and the cultural logics as well. So you can speak of like the agency role in shaping these in shaping rules and norms and even like formal institutions and ideas as well, and values. So it's not only strategic calculations, but also some sort of ideational foundation of institutional outcome. So it actually blends together different styles of research and basically structural elements and these different kinds of different logics of calculations and strategic calculations and cultural logic as well. So it emanated as a reaction against structural functionalism and group politics that reduced the entire political dynamics to a group conflict or class conflict, and these traditions actually define or analyze institutions as an outcome, or as perceive this or analyze this from the consequences of these as a response to structural needs, for example. So it gives kind of a functional explanation of institutionalism, or the origins of institutional rules. So meaning, how do you explain the persistence of particular institutions because of their persistence, because of their like they satisfy this utility maximization, so that's why they persist over time. So you actually explain the persistence of institutions through the consequences of their existence or of their presence. But they still the same departure point as structuralism. So they borrow some sort of approaches or some conceptual pillars from structuralism, but they went beyond the basic elements or the conceptual foundation of structuralism as the theoretical school in comparative politics. So they still define politics as this broader, if you remember the graph, this overall system of different interacting parts, or like this kind of relational approach between different parts from this overarching system. And still the conflict between different social groups is essential and pivotal in analyzing the emergence of institutions or institutional rules from the perspective of historical institutionalists. But actually, they went beyond this definition by assigning a central role to organization of polity and political economy as well. So instead of highlighting that any kind of institutional change is kind of only a response to structural needs or the need of the system, like David Easton, for example, when he mentioned this kind of mechanisms or adaptation of the system, because it's kind of it's mechanical rules in order to persist over time. So it's kind of because of the need to adapt to its surrounding environment. Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, doctor.
Yeah. So because of this,
Doctor,
yeah.
Yara Abdul Maqsood and Rauda Murad need the access to join in.
I have Rahma and Nurhan.
I'll ask them again.
Yeah.
They join.
Yeah. So instead of examining or perceiving institutions as a response to the need of the system, it's kind of the transition from feudalism to capitalism because of this kind of expansion and the modernization. So the system needs this kind of transformation or this kind of a change. So they actually assign proponents of historical institutionalism, they highlight the importance or the centrality of the organization of the polity and the political economy or the socio-economic development with the emergence of the new rules or the new institutional outcomes. So there is a role for individual ideas and culture and social processes that would affect the institutional outcome instead of perceiving this as the mere response to the system needs, this kind of functionality angle. And by the same token, they still perceive or they still analyze or they still care about analyzing state, but state, it is not like a coherent whole, but it's kind of assemblage of different institutions and different organizations. So you can analyze the interactions between different interests in order to highlight the emergence of new rules and new institutions. You need to analyze the interaction between legislators, for example, and particular political interest in order to pass particular law, like or to establish new financial system. You need to analyze the labor movements in relation to the state apparatuses or the political regime or like the new president or the new government in relation to labor movements in order to analyze particular social policies or different formulation of state-society relations or the emergence of corporatist arrangements, for example. You need to analyze the emergence of welfare state or welfare system with far-reaching social spending. So you need to analyze the interaction between different ruling elites and different interaction between political elites and like social opposition, for example, in order to analyze the emergence of this welfare system as a new institutional rules.
Doctor, sorry for interruption, but Rahma Alaa want your access to join.
So let me explain this example, and then we will go into details. So in Latin America, at a particular moment, political elites needed to modernize the agricultural structure in Central America, basically in Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Honduras, and Nicaragua. So political elites transformed land ownership that was like, public or owned by indigenous communities as kind of communal land. So they need to transform this land ownership from like public ownership, for example, into private ownership. So they needed to sell out large tracts of lands in order to modernize the agricultural system and basically to increase the productivity of the coffee sector in order to integrate into the international market, increasing productivity, and then to export more of the agricultural outputs, and then to get integrated into the global market and to accumulate some sort of benefits and wealth for the new elites or the elites with this reformist mentality and mindset. So what happened, it was like a division between conservative bloc or conservative faction and liberal faction. So the liberal faction needed to proceed radically with the reform programs, with the privatization of the land in order to get integrated into the global market. And some countries managed, as you see here, with the radical liberalism in Guatemala and El Salvador, political elites managed to push further for this like large-scale privatization measures that transformed the property rights and transformed the private ownership of agricultural lands. And then like reformist liberalism that they proceeded gradually instead of radically. So they privatized a small scale of lands, and they didn't accelerate the pace of privatization. And then upwarded liberalism. So these in Honduras and Nicaragua, so these elites managed to privatize some lands, but it didn't go well with the integration into global market. By undertaking these economic transformation and privatization of agricultural lands, they created new political and economic elites that they had vested interest in perpetuating or reversing the existing economic structure. So by modernizing the agriculture or increasing or integrating into this commercial agricultural system, this gave rise to new political elites with new political power. And subsequently, they modernized the state apparatus. So they created extensive bureaucratic apparatuses and administrative apparatuses in order to organize and to manage this large-scale agricultural processes and export-led economies. In some countries, these processes gave rise to some mobilization from below, like peasants. They started to organize rebellion against these newly emerging political elites. And in some countries, they managed to establish or to increase the military power or to establish like a coercive military apparatus. And in other countries, they didn't manage to do that. So with the initial point here was the modernization or the transformation of the agricultural system by undertaking privatization measures and integrating or increasing productivity of commercial agricultural sectors. And the sequence of the process with that in Guatemala and El Salvador, these processes gave rise to new political elites. These political elites, they had like occupied some powerful positions in the administrative structure of the state, and they built the coercive capacity of the military establishment in order to protect their economic interests and to quell or to put down any kind of social rebellion. With reformist liberalism in Costa Rica, for example, they managed to modernize and privatize small tracts of lands, and this gave rise to new political elites and new economic interests that they had vested interest in the existing political system, and modernized subsequently the state apparatuses or the administrative apparatuses of the state. But they didn't this gradual process of reform didn't result in any kind of social polarization, or it didn't give rise to any class conflict between peasants and landowners, or the new the new elites that benefited from the commercial agricultural policies. So they didn't need to increase the coercive capacity of their military establishment, and they didn't actually they didn't have to deal with any kind of social polarization. In other countries, with this aborted liberalism in Honduras and Nicaragua, political elites managed to privatize large tracts of lands and proceeded in a way or another radically with some reform measures in some countries. But the thing is, it didn't give rise to or give space to new elites to occupy power centers. So new elites in coffee and banana sectors, for example, they accumulated wealth, but they didn't have any control over political positions. So the emergence of agrarian elites with significant political power was not there, and subsequently there was no incentive to modernize or to centralize the state apparatuses in order to protect the same, to run like the economic affairs and to protect their interests. And the large, like the last chain here, the class polarization and class conflict in rural areas and the emergence of powerful military apparatuses was not there as well in Honduras and Nicaragua. And he used like this story, or like tracing these historical developments, in order to understand why some countries in Latin America established democratic regimes, like stable democratic regimes, as it was the case in Costa Rica, and some other regimes in Guatemala and El Salvador, they entrenched like ruthless and repressive military regimes or authoritarian regimes. And in Honduras and Nicaragua, some like traditional families, they managed to perpetuate their power and rule during that period, despite the fact that they all started from these kind of structural departure point or antecedent conditions of transforming land properties and privatizing large scale of lands, and this liberal reform during this liberal reformist period. So far, the story is clear. Guys?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that you can hear me, okay?
Okay.
So according to historical institutionalism, to apply this, to apply like historical, or to undertake this analysis from historical institutionalist perspective, so you need to understand some key concepts. So the first departure point, they say that in order to analyze any institutional outcome, here the outcomes you need to investigate. So the question why some countries established military authoritarian regimes and others democratic regimes, while different countries in Central America had the same traditional dictatorial regime. So in order to understand this outcome as from historical institutionalist perspective, so you need to historically trace the process that led eventually to this political outcome. So they started from what they called antecedent conditions. So actors or different like social groups and social processes occurred historically within given or antecedent structural conditions. So that was the nature of this liberal conservative cleavages when this kind of elite conflict started to surface between liberal faction and conservative faction over the level and the pace of agricultural modernization. So that was like the antecedent conditions that had some historical sequences that led eventually to particular outcomes. And with these antecedent conditions, political actors found themselves or faced what they say, like historical institutionalists say, critical juncture, which is they found themselves in a position or in a situation where like they had like to take or to make a choice and to take a decision. It's a branching point to go this way or that way, to have like to push radically for radical reform policy or gradual reform policy. So at this critical juncture, political elites, liberals here, they had to decide or they had to make a choice regarding the pace of the social and economic reforms or economic modernization. With the choice taken at this point in time, it had like some sort of structural persistence. So it triggered some changes, or it actually put historical developments along a particular path. So with radical reform measures, they reproduced some sort of radical social and economic transformation, as it was the case in Guatemala and El Salvador. And with the structural persistence in the case of proceeding with gradual reform measures in Costa Rica, it was like reformist liberalism, or reformist era of commercial agriculturalism, and or apported liberalism, as was the case in Honduras and Nicaragua. So with the antecedent conditions, with the cleavages between conservative factions and liberal factions, and they faced this branching point or this critical juncture to make a choice regarding to the scope of privatization and the pace at which they had to go about agricultural modernization. And this led to historically to structural persistence that produced some sort of different structural outcomes or different structural characteristics with the production and reproduction of radicalism or gradualism or aborted liberalism. And with this new structure, there is kind of a conflict between different social classes and different social groups. What they say, this kind of reactive sequence. In this period, there is these kind of structural persistence would trigger resistance, backlashes, and transformations from different social groups, as in some countries, these class transformations and agricultural transformation gave rise to bottom-up mobilization with pro-democracy movements and peasant rebellion. In other countries, it didn't produce any sort of this class mobilization or class conflict. With this relative prominence and success of democratizing movements, you can plausibly account for this outcome. With the emergence of pro-democracy movements, and like a low intensity of class polarization or class conflict, Costa Rica managed to establish stable democratic regime. With this peasant rebellion and harsh crackdown or the strong military establishment in Guatemala and El Salvador, these countries managed to establish military authoritarian regimes, while with this aborted liberalism period in Nicaragua and Honduras, that it didn't trigger any sort of structural transformation or class polarization and re-establishment or rebuilding the state capacity in terms of administrative and military capacity of these states. So that's why traditional dictatorial regimes manage to sustain and to endure over time. Okay.
Doctor, I have a question.
Yeah, Yara.
Yes.
Go ahead.
دلوقتي هو there is a conflict ما بين ال radicalists وال gradualists, but I don't get how it persists يعني.
No, the outcome of these choices,
It may persist or not.
Yeah, it produced some sort of it brought about structural transformation anyway, like here. So you see this table. Some countries
Yes.
like stopped at this kind of fourth stage, and these countries stopped at the second stage in this like historical sequences. Okay, so with this structural antecedents, with the antecedent conditions, they had this division between conservative and liberal factions over privatization of lands and modernizing your agricultural system in order to get integrated into global market. So the decision, the scale, the pace at which you proceeded with the agricultural and economic reforms, it produced, or the outcome of this is structural transformation or structural changes. Okay, the manifestation of these changes, it was like the emergence of new economic elites with some sort of occupying, power positions, political position. So you have like cohesion between economic elites and political elites in some countries, as it is the case with the radical liberalism and reformist liberalism. But it stopped, like it didn't like with the aborted liberalism, these structural transformation, it led to aborted liberalism because it didn't produce any kind of new elites to occupy, new economic elites that they had interest, or they had control over political apparatuses, or they had control over political power centers. Okay.
So the structural transformation, for example, emerging of new economic elite, may be persist or not?
Yeah, it depends, but it depends on the pace at which they proceeded and the scale of the privatization as well.
Okay, doctor.
Okay, but this is not the outcome variable. You need to understand the outcome, or the institutional outcome you need to understand is what?
There is an emerge of an economic elite or things like that.
The outcome, the institutional outcome you need to investigate.
اللي هو في structural transformation حصل يعني.
Okay, let me repeat. We guys study like theoretical approaches to comparative politics because we need these theories to help us answer some questions, okay? And methodologically speaking, like adopting, this behavioral and post-behavioral positions. So you have like independent variable and outcome variable, okay? The dependent variable. So which is your outcome variable. And these theoretical assertions and theoretical formulations would help you answer or investigate social political phenomena or the outcome you need to investigate, okay? So in this example, so what's your outcome variable?
I'm not sure, but in في new elite emerged.
Look at the chart, look at the graph. Guys, you studied this in your methodology class, right? X and Y, dependent and dependent. Independent variable and dependent variable. Just yes or no? Yara?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah. You studied this in your methodology class?
No,
No?
not yet.
No, we didn't, doctor.
Okay. So as I mentioned in week 2, in order to understand or to examine any social and political phenomenon, you need a theory, okay? Let's say. So you need theoretical assertions or theoretical tool that would help you understand something, like rational choice, for example. If you need to understand voting behavior, so why people like vote for this party or that party. So that was like the outcome, or this is like the phenomenon you need to investigate. So this is the outcome variable. And you need like independent variable that would help you, or to explain, or explanatory variable that would help you understand how this variable, the explanatory variable, caused the outcome variable. Okay, so how X causes Y. Okay, so
Doctor, is that like the interpretation and the explanation?
it's it's related to the week 2 one, the difference between causality and interpretation. Okay, with causality,
Okay,
you need to understand the mechanisms, okay, the causal mechanisms or the causal chain that will help you understand how certain set of variables would help you understand or would account for particular outcome variable, or like your Y variable. Okay. So here,
doctor.
as I mentioned, so I'm interested in with Moore, what was the main concern? Why did he write his book? You already wrote your reaction paper 3. So what kind of political and or like social phenomenon he needed to investigate? Anyone from those who are going to present? Farida, Sharif, Amal, Salma.
Yes, doctor.
Yeah.
Can you please repeat the question?
So what was the outcome or the main dependent variable, or the outcome variable, or the social and political phenomenon Barrington Moore tried to understand?
He tried to concerning Moore, صح? The application of Moore.
Yeah.
he trying to he first take the structural theory to understand how the political outcome will differ in the same case or in the same case in different countries.
What were these political outcomes?
Doctor,
Yeah,
if-
Karma?
like he was taking an example of the empires, like the Egyptian Empire and the Ottoman Empire, and like different variables, but they all lead to a same outcome. Like they all share history, and every one of them.
Guys, when I ask you, like, what's your X, what's your Y, it's like a clear cut and straightforward. It has to be like a straightforward answer. So the political outcome in Moore's account is this systemic transformation. Like why some countries manage to establish like a capitalist democratic regimes, and while others ended up with having a fascist and communist regimes. Right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
so the outcome variable is this systemic transformation. I need to understand this overall systemic transformation: democracy, fascism, communism. In order to examine this, in order to understand this, what kind of causal explanations he offered in order to understand this political outcome?
The bourgeoisie impulse.
Yeah,
He was trying to study the bourgeoisie impulse in different cases to know how it caused the outcome that he was searching for.
Yeah, and juxtaposed this to the agrarian mode of production.
Yeah, whether it's a market or a labor repressive.
And the revolutionary inclination or potential
of the peasants.
Yeah. Okay, so these are your axes, your independent variable. It could be like one independent or interaction between different variables that would account for your political outcome. Here, it's roughly the same structural account or the same structural explanation for particular political outcome. So what's it like? James Mahoney here, he tried to understand regime changes in Central America. Okay, so why some countries had military authoritarian regimes while others like had stable democracy, and the third category or like a third group ended up having or maintaining the same traditional dictatorial regime. Okay, so this is, you see here the graph, the outcome on your right hand side.
Oh,
yeah, so this is the outcome he needed to investigate. So in order to investigate this, he traced the process historically, okay, the structural transformation that led eventually to this political outcome or these different forms of regime types. Okay. And he started out with the same like structural conditions. They in technical or in terms of historical institutionalist terms, it's antecedent condition. Okay, so what was the antecedent conditions here? This kind of the cleavage or the fraction between or the division between liberals and conservatives over the pace and the level of modernization. Small track, like a small lands or large land holding. So to privatize like radically or like gradually. Okay, so over like this kind of the scope and the pace of modernization, so they diverged, they actually divided over this political choice or economic policy choice. So they call like this critical juncture. At this critical juncture, agency or political actors, they make decisions, okay, that would lead to structural transformations. So it's no longer the same as, it's kind of like dividing or turning point between, you can distinguish between before and after this point. So after this point, after this critical juncture and the choices made at this critical juncture, so there is no longer like communal ownership of lands that were belonged to or owned by indigenous people, for example. So the allowed for a different system of property rights by selling out some lands to private business or to business people. So they created, but by this choice, okay, with regard to the scope and the intensity and the level of the agricultural reform, by selling out like large tracts of lands to people, so you created like private ownership system, and you created new elites, like property, like people who owned lands. Okay, so you created like a political, like a social group with, or social class with a specific form of land ownership. Okay, so it depended on the scope and the level. This produced like radicalism, reformism, or apported liberalism. And during this liberal reform period, put historical developments on a particular path, okay, that eventually led to military authoritarianism or democracy or traditional dictatorship. Because these kind of transformations, back to the table here, these kind of structural transformations with the emergence of the new elites, so the main parameters here, it led to some sort of polarization between landed elites or property or upper class and peasants, and this gave rise to pro-democracy movements from below in order to pressure the political regime to distribute, some material benefits, or to ask for different kind of social and economic policies. And it depends on the repressive capacity of the military establishment. Some countries managed to repress or to quell these like peasant rebellion, and other countries actually they didn't face these polarization and military repressive power. And other countries actually, with these structural persistence, by analyzing this chain or this structural historical sequence, they stopped at particular stages that it didn't trigger or didn't bring about any kind of new economic, new cohesive political and economic elites, and rebuilding the military and the coercive capacity of the state apparatuses. So that's why we can bear on, or we can explain why Guatemala and El Salvador had military authoritarian regimes, while Costa Rica established a stable democracy, and Honduras and Nicaragua maintained their traditional dictatorial system. Okay? So what historical institutionalism here is doing, it actually, it mainly addresses big puzzles, like big questions. So you need to examine some sort of a structural transformation. So it has to be related to, for example, processes of state building, how national liberation movements in the Middle East, different forms of a struggle against colonial power reshaped the state institutions, or reshaped the nature of the state-society relations in the post-colonial period. Why ethnic politics became much more became prominent at the national level, for example, in Syria. So you trace it historically to some historical developments that gave rise to the Alawis' dominance over centers of power. Why some countries have a stable democratic regime, this kind of systemic transformation, like Costa Rica. Why Costa Rica, comparing to other other countries in Central America, had like a stable democratic rule. How welfare state emerged in Europe, for example. So you need to understand this kind of broader or big puzzles that actually these puzzles might run against well-established theoretical transformations, theoretical formulations. Like, for example, in authoritarian regimes, you find somehow strong business associations in Mexico under the one dominant party rule, strong feminist organizations or feminist movements within the context of authoritarian regimes. So what you try to examine here is it runs against the conventional wisdom or the existing theoretical formulations or assertions, and you're driven by this puzzle and this question, and you need to collect some facts and to trace it historically, to trace the process historically in order to account for this outcome. So you don't have like rational choice, you don't have theoretical, or you don't adopt this deductive mode. So you don't have like theoretical elaboration, and based on this theoretical elaboration, you apply this to particular settings in order to investigate the outcome. So, and they don't claim they hereby tracing the process historically and to break down these kind of historical sequences. So they believe that the same like the same operative forces, it might produce different political outcomes, because the antecedent conditions and the structural persistence, or what it triggered at the critical juncture, these outcomes are limited to particular context and inherited factors that you need to investigate. And you need to understand these kind of interacting processes as between the liberals and conservatives, between different rural elites and peasants movements. So you need to understand how these kind of overarching processes and social interactions shaped and reshaped the institutions of the state, the administrative apparatus, and the military coercive power. So it's not necessarily an outcome of your strategic calculations or preferences, but it's not necessarily an efficient outcome. For example, it actually was actually conditioned by some sort of historical developments that put these processes and social processes on different pathways. For example, some countries managed to develop, to have like some sort of technological development in order to get integrated into the global market, while others didn't manage, and they keep the same traditional institutions or traditional rules that account for economic underdevelopment in place. So it's not efficient, but you can trace it historically in order to, you may find that historically there at some point like traditional elites, they had like much more power than modernizers. So that's why they blocked any move down the path of technological development. So the key concepts here, it's big questions and big puzzles, and then historical processes and breaking down these historical sequences. So it's the historical institutionalists, they take time seriously. So like you trace, this kind of historical process of this division between conservative and liberals. So you need to be sensitive to this critical juncture or this moment in order to understand the outcome. So for example, like the social processes and these kind of structural transformations, they usually or historically happened in infrequent way. These kind of macro processes, it has some like stop and go mode. It doesn't like, sometimes, it fixed at a particular moment before like proceeding or triggering some sort of large scale transformations. So in order to understand, for example, this lengthy and slow process, so you need to trace the historical sequences, to trace the process historically. So you need to collect some facts and details in order to examine like the correlation between different variables it's not only the associations or the correlations between liberal and conservative division and the pace or the scale of the land transforming, land property or privatizing agricultural lands, but you need to examine the causality, how at this point in time, this kind of relation between different two variables caused class divisions or class polarization and building the administrative and the military capacity of the state that eventually led to give rise to pro-democracy movements to be thrived or to be repressed or suppressed, and eventually different types of political regimes. So it's not like you need to examine, this causality by examining this historical process and by breaking down these historical sequences. It entails some examination, or you make causal inference, or you make, you examine the causal chain as well. So you in a way or another, you theorize about historical dimension of causation. So by investigating this elite fractions and elite divisions over economic policy making, by examining how this division led to particular choices, radical and reformist, or gradual reformist, or aborted liberal reformist. So you make this you make like a theoretical assertion, or you make causal inference from this historical dimension of this relation between structural conditions and structural outcomes, or the origins and the impact of this structural antecedent conditions. So another point, as I mentioned, it's kind of, you have to face like this critical juncture that it demarcates the boundaries, or you can speak of it's kind of a broader rupture within the existing structural properties or determinants. And this led to, according to their terminologies, punctuated equilibrium. So the system with this before the division between conservative and liberals, it was like a political equilibrium. No one had any kind of incentive to defect. So they both accumulated wealth from the existing agricultural structure or agricultural system. And before this division over privatizing agricultural lands in order to commercialize the agricultural sector and to get integrated into the global market. So they faced this kind of branching point that they had to make a choice or to take a decision regarding the pace and the scale of the social, the economic reforms. And from this division, the historical developments actually were put on a particular path that led to the persistence of liberal reformists, like transformation of larger tracts of land or privatized larger tracts of lands, or keeping like privatization of small holdings, and while maintaining some sort of communal and public ownership of some lands in Costa Rica, and then in Honduras and Nicaragua. Privatization led to the intervention of the United States in order to protect its own economic interest or vital interests there, and this precluded some structural transformation, or the legacy of reformist period or liberal reformist period was totally different, and led to the perpetuation of the same dictatorial traditional regimes. So it actually, here it's kind of at this critical juncture, there is a room for agency choices. So the choices made at this point would account for different path dependencies in different countries, or to account for different political outcomes. So one conceptual pillar as well is path dependency. So what path dependent is? According to proponents or historical institutionalists, so they perceive, once you take a particular choice and you set the historical developments or this kind of social process along a particular path, so it keeps going along this path. it's kind of self-enforcing process, like by quelling, pro-democracy movements in Guatemala and Salvador. So the military had to invest in suppressing any kind of peasant rebellion, any kind of any mobilization from below. So it had like each time to deploy forces in order to repress any emerging social challenges or social resistance. So they didn't have the choice to go back and to allow for some sort of like to reverse, this privatization policy choice. So it's kind of irreversible. It triggers some sort of irreversibility when it comes to the choices made at the critical juncture. It actually removed some political possibilities from the list of the political options available to you. So it's kind of, they call it increasing return, that you have to keep investing in a particular choice all the way through, because of the cost of reversing this it's so high. So it recurred itself, or it actually persisted. The persistence of the pattern into the future is the outcome. So by suppressing and repressing any like grassroots movements or peasant rebellion, and investigating and investing in the military and the coercive capacity of the state, you have to keep this going in order to stabilize the military authoritarian regime already established at this point. So they allowed, some space for, unlike other strands, of new institutionalism. So they take like time seriously, and they pay attention to this, the balance of power between different political forces, or the asymmetrical power relations between different forces, as part and parcel of these social processes and historical dynamics. So back to Skocpol account of social revolutions, like a quick reminder, what are the independent variables or the explanatory variables that would account for social revolutions? Why these countries had social revolutions? France, China, and Russia. So the outcome is social revolutions. So the independent variables are those who addressed Skocpol in the reaction paper. What kind of variables she talks about? Okay, by tracing this process historically, she talked about the military and the administrative capacity of the state, like the class conflict as well. So domestic factors and international factors, the vulnerability and the military capacity in relation to different imperial states. So it's kind of, she talked about the interaction or the conjuncture between domestic and international factors that would account for this political outcome, which is social, this structural outcome, which is social revolutions. So any other account might, gloss over this point and might consider this as a triggering factor, like a military defeat or the positionality in the international system. So they might consider this as a triggering factor rather than a background or a structural preconditions in order to bring about revolutionary outcomes. So with path dependency, you trace the process historically, so you care about these sequences and how particular choices and decisions put historical developments along particular path. and this path is self-reinforcing because of this path dependency is meaning it's self-reinforcing process and this kind of positive feedback. So you keep investing in a particular choice in order to stabilize the outcome. So that's why it left, a legacy, and it actually logged in your institution in a particular onto a particular path. And this they care about the sequence and the interaction effect between different variables as well, while investigating, this tracing the process historically. So you can examine, the interaction between different variables as well in order to come up with this general claim or the general theoretical assertions. With the chain of causality, historical institutionalists, as I mentioned in the very beginning, they care about they brought together, or they actually blend together different research styles. So at critical junctures, for example, they do care about agency choices or choices made. They do care about this power relations between different social groups and different political coalitions. And some of them, they might care about ideational factors or ideas as well. So basically, this institutions or structures or these kind of social processes are not only like the same or the only factor that would account for the outcome. So they pay attention to socioeconomic, the political economy, most especially the socio-political development, and diffusion of particular ideas as well, like stable democracies after the third wave of democratization. So perhaps because of this diffusion of the ideas of democracy promotion and the end of the military, the end of the period of the military coup. So this gave rise to this, the idea became very attractive, how the democracy promotion and this idea of establishing democratic governance and this separation between, or like re-establishing or restructuring civil military relationships. So the ideas diffusion as well is very important. So they don't claim that structures or the social processes are not the only factor that would account for the outcome. Some of them, they would examine the interaction effect between social processes and different cultural elements and political economic elements as well. So just like a quick recap, so they do care about large-scale processes, so this kind of systemic and structural transformation and big puzzles and big questions. So they move between different levels of analysis. So here it's not only like a structural processes, so they do care about, individual or agency choices as well. And this kind of multi-dimensional aspect of historical processes, it's not only structural, but maybe like you assign a role to cultural or agency choices at a particular moment in order to account for the outcome. And there is it's kind of a complex analysis, because you cannot analyze the political outcome or the institutional outcome in isolation of different actors, different organizational actors, and different institutional settings. So you hear with Mahoney account, you have like conservative liberal elites, you have peasant rebellions. So different organizational actors inside the state, inside the polity structure, and different institutional setting as well, by paying attention or shifting the focus to this class polarization between landowners and peasants. So the institutions, rather than assuming it's kind of like an emergence or an outcome or aggregation of individual preferences, or the preferences of goals and the goals of political actors in order to maximize their utility, and this is the most efficient way. It's a byproduct of social processes that might give rise to inefficient political institutions, and it might have unintended consequences. So individuals cannot control, the historical developments down the path. And again, like there is kind of a difficult. It's difficult to separate between the origins and the impact of the particular structural transformation. Like last lecture, I mentioned something about the guerrilla warfare in last week. Wickham Crowley. How agricultural structure and the dislocation or evicting, peasants from their lands. At some other point in Nicaragua, for example, this led to emergence of revolutionary forces. So it's very difficult to disentangle the origins of these institutions like agrarian structure or agrarian modernization with and what kind of impact would come out of this structural origins or the institutional origins. Some methodological issue here, it's can we make like any valid general argument or generalized theoretical assertions by focusing on small n comparison? So it's roughly the same, go back to last week's lecture about the structural accounts. So you can make like probable generalized claim about this. But generally speaking, historical institutionalists are very slow when it comes to aggregating, finding into systemic theoretical claims in comparison to constructivist and rational institutionalists. And here again, the same question, agency or structure, like rational choice or structuralism, this conundrum. They sorted this as with focusing or in this process tracing and this conjuncture of different, or the interaction between different political variables or different historical variables. So they made the same claim. It's not like either or logic. It's kind of strategic choices of agency or political actors within particular constraints or institutional constraints on their choices. So individual choices or individual behavior within specific institutional and structural parameters would trigger different institutional outcomes. So again, like the choices of the scale of privatization, the pace at which they undertook this commercialization of the agricultural sector, this led to different social transformations within the existing class structure, and subsequently the political outcome or the eventual regime type. Okay? So you have to write your reaction paper 4 on neo-institutionalism. I'll post instructions on Moodle, and it's due still on Sunday. And next week is off. After your colleagues, finish their presentations, I'm going to talk about your midterm exam. Okay?
Doctor?
Yeah.
Can you postpone it to the next week?
Which one?
This week, the fourth reaction paper, because this
Please,
week is so
Doctor.
crowded with, like, we have every day in this week a midterm exam.
This week?
We don't yeah, the next week.
Next
like,
one.
First, like 1st of December, 2nd of December, 3rd.
There is a problem here, because you have to, this will overload you, because there is like a midterm exam coming up next week. So if this is like, it works best for you just to finish, this reaction paper, and then study. I leave you for the entire week to study for your other courses, and then perhaps like next weekend I'll post the question for the midterm exam, and we can decide on the deadline. It should be due on December the 9th.
Doctor,
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a problem with the connection in the first 10 minutes of the lecture, so I'm not sure if you have my name. You wrote it or not?
Yara?
Yes, Yara
Yeah.
Abdel Masoud.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so let's start with the presentations.
Doctor, yes, I'm here, but
Farida? Yeah.
yes, or my other colleagues will begin. I don't know. Sharif and Salma.
Sharif and Salma? Yeah, okay. So they are here?
مش عارف صراحة.
They know that there is a presentation, right?
Doctor, I mean,
Sharif, I think is, yeah?
I'll do the presentation.
Who's talking?
Amal.
Amal? Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Doctor, can I ask a question? Do you want me to talk specifically about the paper, or can I talk in general?
Your Sharif's group, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's okay. It depends on how you actually prepared your presentation, but basically, this is like for your colleague, not for me. Like to help them organize, their thoughts and how to restructure, their papers. This might help with the midterm exam and with the term paper later. So
Yes,
basically,
okay.
how you synthesize material, how you organize, how you guys actually organize or divide the labor between you in order to come up with this like collaborative outcome or collective outcome. And then, but basically the writing process, like how to explain, the process in a way just to get your message across, to your colleagues and to help them out, with their coursework.
Yes, I understand. So should I start now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Amal?
well, first, yes, Amal.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, we start by checking the guideline you post. So it's normally consisted of 3 parts, either the assumption or definition, the applications, and the critiques. So first of all, we'll give the smallest part or the easiest part to only one person. So for this paper, the easiest part was the critiques. So we only give it to one person. Then the 2 harder or bigger parts are each given to 2 people. So the application was given to 2 people and the assumption or the definition was given to 2 people. Then we start by listening to the recorded lectures. Then we try to summarize them and write notes about them. Next, we head to the readings and we also divided among us. So each person takes the part or a portion that's related to what he or she is writing about. Next, we try to correlate between the readings and the lecture and the PowerPoint. So we decide what information is important and what information is not important. Then we start writing. So we check up on each other every once in a while to make sure that everything is going smoothly. And if one of us is having a problem with his or her part, the others try to join in and help her or him. Then we gather, at the end, we gather our parts and we try to check the word limit. And each person reads the paper separately to make sure that the paper contains all the important information and if there is anything missing. That's it.
Okay. But the thing is, how actually, yeah, this is like the crucial step here. How you guys, can you Amal just elaborate in some detail on how actually you blend together, the lecture and the readings, the material, I mean.
So we listen to the lecture, and then we try to find what are the main points that you talked about in the lecture. Then we try to
listen to this again. Yeah.
Yes, we listen to the lectures again, and we try to write everything important you said. Then we try to find them in the readings, and if there's more information that could explain the topics you talked about. And then we try to correlate both, and then we start writing.
Yeah, and you follow the same instructions I post on Moodle, like, so there's no kind of it's not a difficult task to come up with this different organization or different structure, to structure your reaction paper along, or different themes or points to restructure your term paper. Or
no, we just we follow what you post.
Yes. Yeah, but when it comes to the sub points, like in each, like with the assumptions, with the critiques, and with the application, how you guys make sure or double check on the coherence of the writing?
Can you rephrase the question? I didn't understand.
Okay, so after you finish, after everyone will submit, his or her part, how you actually put this together in order to make sure it's written in a coherent way?
Well, we try to combine the parts, and then each one of us reads the paper and comments on it. So if he or she thinks that the paper is not coherent, or there's
meaning like all of you,
yes,
you have to do the reading anyway.
Yes.
And you have to do, like, it's not like division of labor with the writing, but not with the process of studying or synthesizing the material.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the crucial point here. So
Yes.
like working doesn't mean like
Doctor.
Yeah.
I'm Lubna from Sharif's group also. Amal didn't understand this part. We don't all do the reading again. We just read the summarizing that each one do for his part of the readings.
Yeah. I mean, like, but you all read, like, double check on, or read like the not only for the sake of the reaction paper, but doing the reading generally speaking.
Yes.
Yes.
Before writing the paper, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not. That's why there is kind of a you find coherence in writing, because everyone understands what the others actually wrote.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Thanks, Amal.
You're welcome.
Salma?
Yes, I'm from Salma's group, and me and Hannah are gonna present.
Hannah?
Heidi.
Heidi? Yeah.
Doctor, can you give me permission to share the screen? I have a
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
It's disabled. It's still disabled.
Okay. Can anyone go ahead until I enable this?
Okay. Should I start? Okay, until you give the permission to share screen to Salma?
Yeah. Farida?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, just I'm talking concerning the second reaction paper. Okay, at first, I want to tell you that the our group of the action paper is the same group of the readings, or that we separate readings about each other. Yeah. So first, in the earlier week, one of our group member, which is who's Marwa, take a look at the syllabus and write down the content of of the week, of the readings of the week. And at the weekend, on Wednesday, yes, nearly Wednesday, after we attended the lecture, the live lecture, and we take all the notes that we want to, that will help us understand the readings, and also help us to write down our action paper. So first we went in the group of readings, and we separate separate the readings over each other, and then everyone summarize the topic of the reading that she have, and then after we finish, we send to each other the summary that we write, and we read it all. We cover all the points of the readings that which is in the syllabus, in order to help us to understand the topic in general, and help us to write down the action paper. So after we read it all, and we cover all the points, we go to write our action paper. We first we are three in the group. We and mainly the reaction paper is it's composed of many reports. So we everyone choose that the port it's randomly، يعني مش واحد معين بياخد بورت معين، هو randomly اي حد ياخد اي بورت، خصوصا ان احنا cover all the points of the reading, so it's easy to anyone to take any port يعني. بعد كده we start to everyone start to write down his port as what he understands from the readings, what he understands from your lectures, or if we want to want more examples from Google or something like that, he understands from this, and then he writes his reaction. At the end, we combine all the parts with each other, and then write a small introduction, and then one of us after reading the whole paper, he then write a small concluded marks at the end.
Okay. So let's move to the third one. I enabled screen sharing. So Hannah, Heidi?
It's still not, it still says host disabled participants screen sharing.
Sorry?
It still says that it's disabled.
Yeah, perhaps I need.
Okay, just a second.
Can you email it to me right now?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So I can share it, and then yeah, I enabled it, but perhaps I'm not sure if we need to disconnect and reconnect again. So it's much easier to send it to me. Hannah, did you?
Yes, Doctor, I did. Heidi.
Oh, Heidi. Okay. I haven't received it yet. So can you start talking? Oh, yeah. Here we go. Yeah. Here we go. Yeah.
Okay. So we made this presentation based on our experience from the last 3 action papers and the feedback that we get from the doctor. So what might work for us might not necessarily work for everyone, but we're still hoping that it will be effective. Also, I'd like to acknowledge Salma Tajuddin's effort in making the PowerPoint presentation. Okay.
Making what?
The PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. The beginning of the process doesn't actually start when we receive the email, but we try to stay focused starting from Monday on the first lecture. So we have to attend the lectures and make sure the environment is helping us to understand and fully understand the points that we're covering and understand the theories. And then when we receive the email, we were able to extract the points that we need to cover and analyze what we need to talk about. And then we check the readings to see which of these points are available in the readings and how we need to coordinate that. And so we collectively choose the application according to which application seems more important or which application has more material available that we can use to fully comprehend it and be able to talk about it. And so accordingly, after dividing the points, a very crucial point is having an equal workload divided so that we don't fall into the mistake of having one part very well written and the others not that well. So when we have an equal workload, everyone is able to focus on their part equally. And so at the end of the day, the paper is coherent and it's with the same level of effort put in every part. And then we agree on a personal deadline for each one, and we make sure that we're all responsible enough in like meeting that deadline, because our if we're late, we're affecting other people's grades. And now Hannah is gonna do this part. Hannah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Doctor?
Yeah. Hannah?
Yes, Hannah.
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. So I just want to start my part by saying that it has been a process of trial and error, but the points to follow help make things easier. So first, we start by rewatching the lecture to have a better idea of the theory as a whole. But we pay special attention to our task, and we try to take note that would act as a guideline for us when we start working on the readings. It's important to know that focusing solely on the lecture is not enough to write the paper. The readings are of equal importance as well. So when we move onto the readings, we skim and scan it, and we try to pinpoint the most important parts. It's also worth noting that we don't get to writing the paper right away. We create a draft in which we keep the main points from the readings that still need paraphrasing. While working on the readings, we might come across a point that we cannot completely understand. So we can ask the doctor during the office hours, or we can ask a colleague, or we can look for it online. So finally, after all of this is done, we focus on the draft that we've created, and we start writing in our own words while going back and forth between the slides and the draft to make sure that all the points are covered. And to avoid any confusion, this is also important. Most of the time, we cover the points in a flow that is different from that of the slides, and that's totally fine. All that matters is that we write what we write is coherent and understandable. After all of this, we have a WhatsApp group, so we send our documents there, Jan. And that's it. I'll leave the rest to Heidi.
Yeah, Heidi.
Okay, and then after we all gathered our parts, we on our WhatsApp group, each one sends their own part, and we give each other feedback on whether it's understandable, because mainly we're focused on our parts in the beginning of the working process. So we make sure that when we read each other's part, we get the full understanding, even if we all do all the readings, but we don't give as much focus to the other parts. So make sure when we read each other's part, it's understandable, and we also give each other feedback on like the flow and the order of the paper, and we check the lectures together, like on a Zoom call or FaceTime. We make sure that like we read the lecture and make sure that no point is not covered. And then we compile them together and make sure like we have headlines to emphasize what this part is focused on. And then we add a cover paper and we read it once again, make sure it's all understandable, all is covered, and then we submit. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. I really, that's all. Like, this is like how like team working should go. I have to give you credit. I really like your first and second reaction paper, and I really appreciate the effort you put, and it reflects actually both of them actually reflected your understanding and all the effort you put into studying, synthesizing, and even writing and organizing the collaborative work and the joint work between you guys. So thank you so much. And that was like for your colleagues, and hopefully they can benefit in a way or another from these presentations. So meanwhile, so you have to submit your fourth reaction paper on Sunday. And let me check. We have received some instructions regarding the midterm, but I haven't read it yet. But perhaps I'll post the question for your midterm exam on December the 1st. It should be like Tuesday, and you will have like 8 days or a week in order to answer the question. So basically, this will cover the first 2 weeks. So the introduction and the methodology part of the course, because actually you already submitted 3 reaction papers, and you're going to submit the 4th one on the 4th theoretical school. But I need to evaluate your understanding about the first 2 weeks, the introductory part and the methodology part. Okay.
Okay, doctor, there's no way that we can do the term paper in groups.
No. The term paper and the midterm exam, I have to assess you individually.
Okay.
Yeah, and hopefully these presentations will help you out with the way you're going through these processes.
Okay, I hope that my presentation delivered you my idea. I really can talk in this, or it's the first time to be in this situation. So I'm sorry for this. Yes, I'm sorry, but I'm really sorry.
No, thanks. No. Thanks for the presentation. Yeah. Okay, guys. So meanwhile, if you have any questions, just drop me a line, and I'll put some instructions on Moodle regarding your reaction paper 4. And for the midterm, closer to the date, I'll post the question on December the 1st until further notice. If I read, different instructions or something, I'll let you know. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, yeah. See you guys. So next week, we are off. Okay, so see you a week after. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, okay, guys. Bye-bye.